What is up guys, it is Simba here and welcome back to another F1 24 video on the channel. And as you can immediately tell by the title, today's video is going to be a very different one and we're going to be talking about the absolute failure that is F1 24. Now, there have been a flurry of videos on this topic over the last couple of months, but I'm doing this now because I'm also going to include my thoughts on F1 25, which is essentially around the corner. Also, I'm going to warn you now that this video is going to include some gaming theory because this is for one of my assignments in one of the modules that I am studying. So, I have to include it. Sorry, I'm trying to care about this degree and I'm nearly done with it. But I'm going to mention different clips and comments from other creators on YouTube, Twitter, and maybe even Reddit as well, just to give you guys a big picture on how people have felt about this game or to echo your thoughts if you've played it. So if you enjoy this one or agree with what I am saying, make sure to hit the like button and get subscribed for more content as F1 25 is fast approaching. But let's get into it then. This is why F1 24 failed so miserably. F1 24 is the 17th entry in the F1 gaming franchise and the 4th title under the EA banner. It follows F1 23, which was a refreshing improvement from F1 22 in terms of handling and traction through long sweeping corners, especially in the traction zones. The game came out on the 30th of May last year while Max Verstappen was dominating the early part of the championship. But this story goes back a few years. This story goes back to 2020. The year where everyone was in lockdown and couldn't go outside. And F1 2020 was released on the 10th of July 2020 during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. This led to the game reaching the highest number of sales in the franchise's history, and it is still revered by many as the best F1 game to date. However, during this game's life cycle, there was an important announcement that will shift the trajectory of the F1 franchise. EA. On the 18th of February 2021, EA had completed its acquisition of Codemasters for $1.2 billion. On paper, this seemed like a promising piece of business, until you remember what EA have done to FIFA over the last couple of years. So to say there was an air of skepticism around this piece of business would be an understatement. So, the first issue I'm going to discuss here is the online experience on F1 24. Now, if you guys have seen my channel for a while, this is where my bread and butter is in terms of content. It's league racing. So, I think it's only right to start with this topic. Of course, there are several problems in the online space, and this trickles down from the highest level all the way down to the lower leagues. Some people might be very fast, but they might not be the most admirable characters, and mainly poor racing standards being one of the big issues which has reared its ugly head for quite some time. No, I don't mean some random Joe conveniently forgetting to hit the brakes at a hairpin or causing carnage at turn 1. I mean poor racecraft in competitive racing. Now, like I said, unfortunately, this trickles down from the highest level, which is F1 Esports or F1 Sim Racing, and I am looking at you, Thomas Ronhal. This problem with racecraft has been persisting for some time, and maybe in the last 3 or 4 F1 games, and this is something that I've documented quite a few times on the channel, and I'll talk about this a little bit later. However, the main issue with the online experience on F1 24 is seeing the number of players fizzle out. Here is some context for you. Now, on screen is a photo of a WR grid back on F1 23. Now, if you don't know what WR is, WR stands for World Online Racing. This league is one of the most competitive leagues in the league racing scene and one of the most notorious ones as well. This grid was made near the end of the F1 23 game cycle, and typically at this point, most people are looking forward to the new game. This is the second highest tier on the console side that I was involved in, and this list, looking at it right now, it already feels like a throwback, simply because most people on this grid aren't even racing anymore. And this is mainly due to game sales reaching the lowest point since EA's takeover 4 years ago. And you can see on screen there, That is quite a fall off. Now, this can link to the magic circle, which is the first bit of theory I'm going to introduce in this video. The magic circle is a space where normal rules and reality of the world are replaced by the artificial reality of the gaming world. So what that basically means is that when you play a game, you step into a different reality altogether. And this is definitely the case in an online space such as league racing. This is because you can enter a reality where you race people at a similar level to you and try to be as high as you can. Or if you are in open lobbies, you can cause absolute madness at the first corner if you really wanted to. The reason why I mention this is because when you have less people playing the game, especially online, it makes the space feel pretty thin. Christopher Moore says the very basic conception of the magic circle within the virtual world community includes the following elements: protection of spaces for play and the chance to build a new life. And this links to the work of other writers such as Sebastian Deterding and Josh Fairfield, who have also written about this. The references I've shown here suggest that the magic circle really depends on player involvement, especially in an online scenario with other players. So when this circle shrinks, it's quite a discouraging sign and could spell a lot of trouble for the rest of the game cycle. In this case, the magic circle of F1 24 has shrunk simply due to people not enjoying the game. This can also be fueled by people not having the same enthusiasm to buy the F1 games compared to previous years, and as a result, this has made the online community feel a lot smaller. And this has been pointed out by someone who is in the online community called Belrofux on his video What Makes BRT So Good.
With F1 24 struggling with player count, it's becoming harder and harder for them to execute. Assists as a discipline is also not at the level that it just was when most of these drivers were coming through and progressing into the main team, with only a few of the names that are at the top of AEC Tier 1 now being recognisable from even a relatively well-informed perspective. In any case, AEC Tier 1 is a far cry from what it was a few seasons ago, where 11 of the top 20 drivers went on to no assists, many of them with great success, and this has been steadily decreasing ever since.
In this video, Belrofux shows that BRT, an esports team, have a recruitment team of developing no assist drivers from the assist scene. However, this can't be a sustainable method of recruiting drivers considering that less people are on the game. The example of the magic circle shows that F1 24's cycle has caused the entire league racing community to suffer, as well as the quality of some tournaments aren't at the same heights as previous games, which is never a good sign. The second topic I want to cover in this video is the lack of features in the game. And this is going to be mainly targeted at career mode, being very poor on this year's edition of the game. And this is something I really think I should cover first, as this is something I try to briefly make videos out of each game. Not so much success because I don't really enjoy it that much. And that's made worse at the fact that career mode feels quite restrictive on this year's game. And there's one content creator who said a lot about this issue, and that is Tom97. Tom made a video called It's Time to Talk About F1 24. In this video, Tom goes into depth about the problems in career mode.
This game is made worse by the fact there's no mid-season transfers like previous F1 career mode games, so that automatically takes away an element of unpredictability in mid-season. Also, other things which I think need work. A career mode cannot exist, a driver career mode, without my team. My team has been left unattended for the last 4 years, and as I mentioned, driver career for me lasts 3 seasons top. And once you do that, you want to try something else. But my team is exactly the same as the last 4 games, so nothing is there to play on a career mode aspect.
Well, Tom goes into detail about the problems in career mode, and it basically highlights that career mode has a certain lifespan as the regulation changes would have been done within the first 3 seasons. As a result, the game retention is pretty low with this game mode. And Tom also mentions that the game doesn't include the F2 drivers who made a few cameo appearances in real life last year. This including Ollie Behrman, who impressed on debut at Ferrari and had a few other showings in the Haas. Also, the absence of Franco Colapinto was quite costly, as he grew into a very popular character with many fans in a short space of time in the Williams towards the end of the campaign. Another content creator that went deep into the featureless game that is F1 24 is Tom Gorian, and he made the video called F1 24 sucks and here's why, and he had a lot to say on this issue as well.
Because there was no major feature, and the one mode that they promoted, F1 Live, was the one thing we didn't want. And I said this, in last year's game, and I said this ever since 22 came out. F1 Live, we don't want it because it doesn't promote what we actually want. Okay, you're promoting furniture in an F1 game. You're promoting supercars in an F1 game. No, that's not what we want. If I wanted to race supercars, I'd race on Forza Motorsport.
So Tom clearly not happy with the lack of features in the game, and a lot of people aren't happy with it either. And it's basically because of this F1 Live thing being so useless. They're promoting things that we don't want. And you compare this to other games that Codemasters have made over the years. F1 2012 had Champions Mode, where the player will take on 6 world champions as Sebastian Vettel, Fernando Alonso, Kimi Raikkonen, Lewis Hamilton, Jenson Button and Michael Schumacher on the grid. And the player was faced with scenarios that were characterised by the drivers. So for example, you'd have to beat Sebastian Vettel by winning the race and getting the fastest lap, as that's what he was known for at the time. Lewis Hamilton was a pass master, so you'd have to overtake him and win the race. Or Button, you'd have to beat him in wet conditions, as he made his reputation from winning in changeable conditions. These are small things that kept that mode so exciting and really just kept their game retention on F1 2012. F1 2013 had a classic cars feature that included cars, drivers and tracks from the 1980s and 90s, and it allowed players to have both worlds collide by driving the 2013 cars on classic circuits such as Imola or Jerez. And this was a feature that was reintroduced in 2017, which continued to F1 2020 with different cars, of course. F1 2015 came out and it introduced a brand new engine for the new Xbox One and PS4 consoles, which is an engine that is still being used to this day. That's probably all I can say about F1 2015. But the following 3 games of F1 2016, 17 and 18 took big steps in revamping career mode through the agents and the research and development sections on how to upgrade your car. 2018 also introduced the ERS system being used in the games for the first time, allowing players to toggle through different modes to give them more electrical power, especially in overtaking scenarios, and it really introduced the idea of ERS management in competitive races. F1 2019 introduced F2 drivers on the grid along with mid-season transfers to create a sense of unpredictability in your career mode saves, which also aided to game retention down the line. F1 2020 obviously introduced My Team career mode for the first time, which gave a much needed lease of life to that game mode. It also had feedback from the real F1 drivers, which helped the development of the game. And in addition to this, the ERS system was simplified, with players only having to use an overtake button instead of toggling through 4 to 5 different modes at once in order to manage the battery properly. F1 2021 introduced Breaking Point, which returned in F1 23 and will return in F1 25, which everyone is definitely excited about at this very point. But I digress. 2021 also introduced new tracks such as Portimao, Imola and Jeddah, which were nice additions to not just career mode, but league racing as well. F1 23 also added tracks such as Qatar, Las Vegas, and even brought back the red flag, which was absent for nearly a decade. And F1 24, when you compare it to everything else I've just mentioned, it brings nothing. Consequently, the game retention is going to be very low, especially when you don't make changes to game modes that you already have. And it's getting to a stage now where it's pretty scary, because people are starting to question why they are even buying these games in the first place, or even worse, even play them, like that's been the case for F1 24. And it's pretty much the same thing around FIFA. You know, people have been feeling about this around FIFA for years, for several years, or EAFC as it's being called now. And even the FIFA YouTuber Nick Run the Foot Market made a video a few days ago which delved into the problems of that game, when he says,
I am at the point with this game that I straight up feel like I'm avoiding playing the gameplay. Like, I really feel like I'm getting to that point, and I have been a lot of this year. I've not been motivated, and I'm avoiding the gameplay.
And unfortunately, this is a feeling that I am definitely familiar with whilst playing F1 24. Mainly because I have to practice for these races that I do, and practicing on a game that isn't enjoyable feels like an absolute chore, and it doesn't really feel like you're doing anything noteworthy at all. So when you see people not racing properly, or results that do not go your way, it feels like a massive waste of time. Even after getting a good string of results like I was at some point in this game cycle, that motivation to play is very fleeting because you then realise, I have to play this game. And that is a feeling that you never want whilst playing a game, regardless of what it is. The third topic I want to mention is subgenres. Now, I'll explain this right now. In gaming, subgenres are classifications within broader genres. These subgenres offer specific categories of gameplay experiences. Some examples include horror or first-person shooter games. The subgenre I'm going to mention here is esports, which is something I mentioned right off the bat of this video. Esports is a big genre in the world of F1 games and plays a pivotal part in the online racing scene. And esports is defined by Sebastian Bloch and Florian Hack as esports is the direct competition between human players using suitable video games under defined rules. So a little bit of a backstory with F1 Esports. It started off in 2017 with Brendan Lee becoming the first ever F1 Esports champion and then following up with a second title in 2018. Since then, there have been another 4 drivers to lift the Esports trophy. David Tanitsa in 2019, Jarno Opmeer in 2020 and 2021, Lucas Blakely in 22, Fredrik Rasmussen in 23-24, and Jarno Opmeer is the only 3-time champion after winning the most recent season. Since F1 Esports was introduced in 2017, the championship has recently returned to LAN events, local area network events in Sweden, where all 20 drivers will be racing in the same space. These races are streamed on several platforms such as YouTube and Twitch, and this season's finale in Abu Dhabi got 450,000 views, which can only show how popular the series is. F1 Esports popularity can be linked to the work of Lorenz Mariano Russell, who says that the broadcast of certain esports events have become worldwide mass events. So, I mentioned the popularity. So how has this game had an effect on the esports scene? Well, when this game first came out, there was one big issue sticking out like a sore thumb. The handling model. The handling model has also played a part in league races as to how setups work, which has been a very frustrating experience from my point of view, as the main problem is that the handling model has got an arcadey front end where wheel players have to completely turn the wheel, completely lock the wheel in order to make the corners. And I'm going to show some examples here. This is comical, to say the least. What's going on here? Now, because of these problems, there were many pad players who were struggling with this handling model, which is why I made this video on screen right now. This was vital as many people were struggling to find their way around the game as everyone was pretty much bamboozled by the aggressive front end of the F1 24 cars. And this is a video that has done remarkably well, which is highly appreciated, and I hope that I can do the same thing on F1 25. Also, this game has brought light to another issue. And this is something that I've documented myself over the last couple of years, with some races being an absolute mess. The racing standards. This can be based off the start of the SLR season back on F1 23, some messy finishes in WR, and this is the case on this game as well. Racing with people gets very messy, and it shouldn't be happening. But the ERS system on the game has made it very ridiculous margins. Everyone is so close together, and it creates very messy finishes in league races. And this shouldn't be happening, but it happens way too often. And this was the same case towards the end of this season's Esports Championship. Thomas Ronhart in the Kickstarter looked to keep his title hopes alive against Jarno Opmeer. However, there was one thing. His racecraft wasn't the best across the season. And that's being kind to it, to be honest. However, the best was saved until the last race in Abu Dhabi, which is why I mentioned it before. Thomas Ronhart gets pole position and needs to win the race to have a chance at winning the Esports Championship. So let's see if he actually manages to get the job done.
On the championship trophy, Jarno Opmeer will be counting down the laps. He's on his way to become a 3-time champion. He's got past Thomas Ronhaar. Oh, Ronhaar! Contact between the two contenders for the title. It all ends in a brawl. Ronhaar into the side of Opmeer.
So as you can see there, he made himself look like an idiot. And I'm not saying this to hate Ronhaar or spread hate or anything like that. I'm just saying that this is really poor. His actions don't help himself, and it's a bad look, not only for him, but for the whole championship, which should be a lot harsher with things like this, regardless if it's the first race or the last race of the championship. That shouldn't be happening, and there's a few other videos I want to show you, just showing how bad this is.
He could have waited for the straight and go for that one, but they make contact. He's pushing into Danny. Danny's bouncing back from the wall, and Ronhaar can continue whilst Danny is going to crash out. And we will see it from behind now, from Rasmussen's POV. So they are taking the corner at normal speed. Look, this is how they actually see that. And out of nowhere, there's cars, and you can't avoid it. It's like impossible. Yeah.
Brutal.
So nothing the drivers could do.
He knows that he is falling.
Bloody hell. Oh my word. I think his head's gone at this point, must be.
Consequently, this sort of racing trickles down to every level below, regardless if you race on console like myself, or if you race other PlayStation drivers, or even on PC as well. It's just not addressed by the top people, so it's going to be accepted in the lower ranks as well, which is absolutely horrendous. Overall, F1 24 has massively failed because it didn't maintain a decent level of game retention from when the game first came out, and this is mainly done due to the lack of features that were put in the game, and the handling model was a huge factor in people turning away from the game as well. Also, the online racing scene, where I'm racing mainly, has essentially been cut in half, as most people are not on the game anymore, or they don't bother racing anymore, and I can only hope that those numbers actually grow by the time F1 25 comes out, and that is fast approaching by the time this video comes out. Also, the lack of addressing for the racing standards from the esports drivers, it's not being addressed, and it will continue being an issue until it gets addressed at the highest level. However, because of these things I've mentioned, there is an air of caution going into F1 25. I'm hoping it delivers, but based off what I've seen and what the big content creators have said about the initial gameplay, I don't feel very confident for this one, and that might be a feeling that you guys have as well about F1 25, and I don't really blame you, because the trajectory of what we're going with this game franchise is down a slope that will be very slippery, to say the least. But that, guys, is the end of today's video. A very different one to what I usually make, and I'm sorry it's been a while since I last made a video on the channel. Be sure to hit the like button and get subscribed for more content, and let's hope that F1 25 is a much better game for everyone, regardless if you are a league racer like me or you enjoy the career modes. Hopefully it's a better experience for everyone. Make sure to check out the channel. There'll be F1 25 content coming in the coming days, but until then, take care, and I will see all of you in the next one.